Diddy-dum-ba-dee-da-dee-da-dum-bum. Dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dum-bum. All right. Thank God it's Erev Shabbos. Shabbos is around the horizon. How wonderful is that? How wonderful. Folks, what do you think?
What's that, Rabbi?
How wonderful it is that Shabbos is coming.
Baruch Hashem.
A day of rest. What are you resting from? What does it mean to rest? All right. Welcome to Tanya today. And we welcome every day. Oh, I think maybe this is a new welcome. A new welcoming? Adrienne? Welcome. I don't know if it's first time, but we welcome you. We welcome also John every day from North Carolina. Rachamim is with us in Houston, Texas, becoming a regular. Beautiful. Davida and Liba, long time regulars from New York. Lynn is joining us from Long Island. Welcome. Joseph is in New Jersey, where it's cloudy. Tim in Texas. I'm sure it's warmer. Diane in Arizona. Sunny day. Eugenia is in Calgary, getting ready for Shabbos. Who else is joining us? Elise in West Virginia. David is in California. Daphne's having a fabulous Friday in South Carolina. Who else is here with us today? Rusty in Texas. Gabriel, welcome. I don't know if not certain if you're a first timer or not. Beautiful. Stephanie is joining us from Philadelphia. Beautiful. We've got Batyan, Vilma, Alan, Adam, Max, Holly, Lena joining us. Clubhousers. And we have Instagrammers, Bella, we have Alcoy in Lima, Peru, we have Mike with us, Rachel in South Carolina is with us every day. Marlene is in Florida, welcome. Yentatella Bente in New York. All righty. So the wise person has eyes on their head or directed above their head to see the light that shines upon them, the divine light. A wise person is always looking to have the light of God upon them. How do you get that light? Well, you need fuel, you need oil, and you need a wick to hold the flame. The oil is the good deeds that we do that produces the light of God, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, that God is present with us. And the wick is the body, because the body is a conduit, as the wick is a conduit, to hold the light of God. This is a beautiful metaphor from the Zohar. Let's understand it more clearly. Now, for the light in the metaphor, if you had oil and you lit oil itself, well, it would produce a light, but it would quickly go out. You need a wick to funnel the oil in order that the light, the flame, should hold. So, but you need the two together. In other words, if you just took a wick and you lit it, so you get a real smoky kind of fire, and it would go out quickly. If you just had the oil and you lit it, then it would, a quick flash, and it too would go out. You need both together. Meaning, you need the good deed, you need the mitzvah, and you need the body, which is the wick. Because the body without the good, without the mitzvah, is going to produce a light that will be smoky. Right? In other words, whatever the body does is, it's not going to create a flame that's going to be a beautiful light. Because the body for itself is just self-directed. The good deed, though, needs to be funneled through the body. What does that mean? In other words, the soul itself is not sufficient. The soul needs the body, right, to extend the hand of the body to be charitable, to put on the arm, right, the body of the person that's filling, to do act of loving kindness. So the conduit of that good deed is through the body, which we'll get more into that metaphor later, the understanding the uniqueness and the importance of that. But let us concentrate for a moment on that fuel that creates the light of God, that the wise person is always trying to make sure there's enough fuel, enough good deeds, enough mitzvahs, in order to create the light of God upon them at all times. And the metaphor for the oil is good deeds as mitzvahs. But why? How about the soul itself? So the wick is the body, we get it. But isn't the soul, the divine soul itself, the fuel that creates the presence of God in one's life? The connection to God in one's life? The very soul itself? The very divine soul itself? Says the Alter Rebbe that no. The soul, the way it comes into a body, has its own kind of identity. Even though it's a divine soul, it's part of the divine. Absolutely. Yet, the love that the soul experiences, the awe that the soul experiences, is still, as the phrase is, yesh misha ohev. It's still an entity for itself that has its own identity and therefore its own sense of being, and therefore its love is not complete. It's not complete. In other words, it's not totally consumed to create the light of God the soul itself in our lives. Which means to say, to experience me and my soulfulness, that through my body, that the soul, it conduit through the body, that I experience my soulfulness and the love and the attachment that I feel to the divine, doesn't create a light in my life of the divine. Even by the righteous, it doesn't do that. Who have a pure love and awe of the divine. Even by them, it doesn't. So then what creates the light of God in my life is the mitzvah. Why? Because the mitzvah has no identity of its own. It's merely an expression of God. It's merely an expression of the divine. The will of God is the mitzvah. The will of God. Be charitable. The will of God. Put on tefillin. The will of God. Make a blessing. Will of God. Kosher food. And so on and so forth. All of them are an expression of God. They're not anything else or anything more but that. Therefore, by the fulfillment of that will of God in the mitzvah, it's the fuel that through the wick, meaning the body that has to be involved in that act of the mitzvah, right, it creates the light, the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God in my life, over me, encompassing me. And therefore the wise person is always looking to do another mitzvah. Because that way there's always the light of God that they are connected with. Now, everything is, an expression of the will of God. This mug is an expression of the will of God. God wills it from his will, divine intelligence, divine emotion, and is expressed finally with the word of God that animates and brings us into being. And clothed in it is the will of God that it exists, that God's creating it. However, when it comes to the will, just as in the human dimension, there's an inner and outer will. The outer will is a means to an end. The inner will is an end in itself. So, for example, I'm sitting in this chair. I used to have a different chair. This chair, as opposed to the other chair, why am I choosing this one? Why do I will to sit in this chair? Because it brings me greater comfort. It brings me, that I sit more properly. My posture is better. So is it the chair that I want? No. So I want the better posture. I want the better comfort. So the chair is only a means to an end. The moment it doesn't do the end that I want, then, out with the chair and in with a new one. But my wonderful children, right? My will for them is not a means to an end. So like, I have a desire for my children because, maybe when I grow very old, they'll take care of me. So really, do I want my child? No, I want them to take care of me. No. I mean, that could be a desire of somebody in truth. But of course, it's not, a good and healthy one. It's a desire for the child because it's a part of you. It's in it, and therefore your connection is an end in itself. Period. It's an end in itself, not a means to an end. So that's the metaphor that I want to use to express that this cup, this mug, the will of God is what animates it. If God didn't will it, it wouldn't be. But it's only coming from an external expression of his will, a means to an end. Does he really want a mug? Does he really want trees? Does he really want animals? That's what he wants? No. They're a means to an end. By the way, I'll give you proof that you don't even want an animal. Well, maybe. Because it brings you comfort. It brings you love. It brings you feeling of not being alone. That's what people want in an animal. So it's a means to an end. And sometimes they do that with their children too, but again, that's not the healthy, good way. So the mitzvah of God is not a means to an end, it's an end in itself. It's an expression of God himself. So when you see someone putting on tefillin or doing, eating matzah on Passover or doing the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah on Purim, whatever it is, it's an expression of the will of God and there's no other identity to it, but that's what God wants. Therefore, being that it's a pure identity of the divine, no other identity than that, it's the combustion, it's the fuel that will create the light of God in my life, as opposed to the love and awe of my divine soul in and of itself. It doesn't, because it's not pure entity of an expression of the divine. It has its own feelings, its own entity, or its own sense of being. Yes, the divine being, but yet a sense of being. So it doesn't give us a perfect unity. It's the mitzvah that fuels the divine light in our lives. It's just a powerful idea. A powerful idea of how important and crucial it is that we have mitzvah in our life to create, again, the presence of God in our lives, the light of God surrounding us. All right. Any questions? I don't see. Alan, welcome. Oh, David. When Mashiach comes, will the body still be needed as a conduit as it is today? Oh, then the body will be much more pure, and it'll be much more, what's the word, obvious that the body is a real conduit to the divine. Yeah, absolutely. Does the soul choose the body it goes into? I don't think so. I don't think so. Is a physically disabled person less or more divine since their physicality limited to do mitzvahs? Good question, Davida. Good question. So the Rebbe once actually said to someone who wanted to do the mitzvah of tefillah and was a soldier in the Israeli army, and lost his arm, left arm, to put on tefillin. Still put on the head, but you couldn't do the arm. So as the Rebbe said, quite obviously, that's not what God needed from you, was that particular mitzvah, because that mitzvah isn't available to you. So when a mitzvah isn't available for you, it's an indication that it's not for you. Which, by the way, just parenthetically, explains to us that mitzvahs that women have that are not men's mitzvahs, mitzvahs that men have that are not women's mitzvahs, or like a Kohen has certain mitzvahs that a non-Kohen doesn't have, and so on and so forth, which means that, the mitzvah is God's thing. He gives the parameters of when the mitzvah is needed, when it's not needed, when he wants it, and when he doesn't want it. And therefore, if you are not in a position to do the mitzvah, so, well, that's exactly what God wanted. As briefly tell the beautiful story of Reb Zusha and Rabbi Elimelech, two brothers who lived in the times of the Alter Rebbe, our teacher of Tanya. And there was once some kind of ruckus going around, and they were passing by, and somehow they got imprisoned with a bunch of drunkards, and they're in a prison cell together with a bunch of others. So, okay, listen, everything's divinely orchestrated. They understood that, but Reb Zusha was very pained because it came morning time and he wanted to pray and he couldn't pray. Why? Because there was a bucket there that was used for relieving oneself, and you can't pray in the presence of such can't pray in a toilet, in a bathroom, right? So it had the law of a toilet. Can't pray there. So he was there. So he told his brother. So his brother Elimelech said to him, the same God that wants you to pray is the same God that says that when a bucket or there's in a place that it's not appropriate to pray, that you shouldn't pray. It's the same God that tells you not to pray, and therefore just do what He wants. Don't pray. Oh, he was so enlightened. He was so, wow, oh, beautiful. He just got up to his brother and he started to dance with him. And he started to dance. All the other guys who were maybe still half drunk or not, I don't know, and they started to dance with them. And comes the warden and sees that everybody's in prison, is enjoying themselves in prison. Prison's not meant to be a joyful experience, right? And gets very upset. What's going on over here? So, it's the Jews. They're celebrating. What are they celebrating? So they understood, because of the motions that were made about the bucket. I don't know, something about the bucket they're celebrating. That bucket? I'm taking it out of here so they can't celebrate. And the warden takes out the bucket and then stops dancing. And Rabbi Elimelech says to his brother, oh, okay, now you can pray. So the point is the will of God as expressed in the mitzvah. So there's a mitzvah to pray, and then there's a mitzvah not to pray. Both are the will of God. And by embracing that mitzvah, it's the fuel that creates the light in our lives. Alan, please share with us.
Yeah, a couple of things. One of them is that it would be helpful for me anyway. Like when you start giving the shiur, if you could tell us what chapter that you're on.
Right.
Because I was able to figure out it was chapter 35 after thinking and doing some searches, etc. But in order to follow and stuff, it would have been
right. Okay.
So, yeah. So if you said wise man has their eyes in their head, or Likutei Amoraim, chapter 35, and we can follow along a little bit easier, perhaps. That's
Got
okay.
it. Okay.
Second is that I was wondering with this illusion, talking, the Alter Rebbe talks about the mitzvot being the fuel that connects to that connects the fire above the Shekhinah, to the candle. How does the kavanah of the mitzvah play into the nature of the flame itself?
Excellent question. And that will be in chapter 38, 39, and 40. We will deal with that. Right now, just for everybody to appreciate, a kavanah means the intent. Where's your heart in all of this? Here we're speaking about the mitzvah, the act of the deed itself, as opposed to the intent in the deed. So for chapters 35, 36, 37, Alter Rebbe is focused on the act of the mitzvah. That's the oil, the fuel that creates the light. And then he will deal with, but there's another element in the will, the inner will of God, and that is the kavanah, the intent. So that will be chapters 38, 39, and 40. So stay tuned. Excellent question, but we're not going to answer it. But we're not going to answer it now.
Yeah, good. But at least I have something to look forward to.
Exactly. Thank you, Alan.
So there's a lot to be learned from watching a candle burn. Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously from the Alter Rebbe's point of view, there's key things going on there, and also as a scientist, that's also an amazing thing in terms of what is really going on in terms of seeing that a candle is burning and the flame above of the candle and how it works and is something beyond what we would normally think,
Yeah.
So.
There's more to this metaphor. We haven't finished. We've just started with the metaphor. We're going to continue with it to take apart the metaphor further in upcoming classes, to fully appreciate through this, first of all, the uniqueness of the act of the mitzvah, and how important the act is, even without intent. Right. So meaning the act of giving charity, even if you're not, very highly intentional in the act, or even when putting on tefillin, if you're not highly intentional, for example, or the observance of the Shabbos and it's not highly intentional. Not to suggest that it shouldn't be, but the novelty in what the Alter Rebbe is bringing over here is in the very act itself, it's creating the presence of God in the act itself, which is quite phenomenal. And we're going to, again, take this apart further in upcoming classes. Yeah.
So the idea of a shear is also not just so that you are thinking something at the moment, but it stays with you for a while, and you think of it during the day. And here, is right before Shabbos.
Yep.
As we light the candles tonight, we'll be looking at candles,
Yep. Exactly.
So it's a perfect time to kind of review what's going on,
Yeah. Thank you.
Right? So
beautiful.
It's a good time. It's a good time to kind of bring this up because we can reflect on it later too. Reflect on it later.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Bella is asking in this idea of someone who's got an illness or a disability, so how can they bring the light of God? Well, there's 613 commandments. There's, plenty of ways that a person can do it. So, if someone has a disability, that doesn't take away the opportunity to do mitzvahs. There are plenty of opportunities, and here we're not going into the specifics of the mitzvahs themselves. That's not the thrust over here. But important to appreciate that it is the mitzvah, and if someone, God forbid, can't do a particular mitzvah, just means that God doesn't need that from the individuals. We told the story of Reb Zushin, Reb Eli Melech in a prison cell, and we just need to find, what is it that God needs from me? What mitzvah does He actually need right now from me? So right now, the mitzvah He needs from us is obviously to be focused in on the learning and to understand the teachings. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Davida. She brings up Rabbi Itzi Horowitz as a perfect example. He's the Rebbe's shliach in California, who is the only thing in his body that he could move, so disabled he is his eyelashes, his eyes and eyelashes. And through that, mind you, he writes a weekly Torah teachings that almost every week I personally read in the L'chaim. He's a perfect example, thank you, Davida, of someone who has total disability. Can you imagine? Heaven forfend that all you could do is move your eyeballs and your eyelashes. But through that, he has a computer that picks up his focus, and he's able to write a teachings or type up a teachings every week. That's more than just powerful. That's more than just amazing. So, and just his very being is an inspiration to so many. Yeah, may he be gesund and well. May Hashem bring a miracle that Hashem can do. God can bring a miracle and free him from the physical imprisonment. Seems like the spiritual imprisonment he doesn't have, but the physical he does. And have a complete and speedy recovery. Beautiful. Yeah, that really brings across the idea. All right, folks. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Rambam's coming up. Please join us and have an amazing day, an amazing Erev Shabbos, an amazing Shabbos. God bless you all. Thank you.